Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into something, well, it's a pretty wild, unconventional theory about history itself. The basic idea? That some of our most famous stories might not just be similar, they might be deliberate echoes of each other.
All right, let's just jump right in with a historical puzzle. What if I told you that the stories of two of Europe's most influential rulers, separated by nearly 500 years, might be more than just a little bit similar? What if they were designed to be a copy?
So let's get right to the heart of it. We're going to start with this really strange parallel in the history books, an uncanny echo that pretty much forms the bedrock of this entire theory.
Okay, so look at these two guys. On one hand, you've got Charlemagne, the legendary unifier of Europe, and on the other, Charles I of Anjou, another seriously powerful king. Now look at the time gap between their key life events. Their coronations in Rome, they're 466 years apart, and their deaths, 471 years apart. I mean, is that just a coincidence, or is something else going on here?
All right, first up, we've got Charlemagne's coronation. This is a huge moment in European history. It's Christmas Day, 800 AD, and he's crowned emperor in Rome. It's an image that's basically locked into our collective memory, right?
And then, bam, almost 5 centuries later, you see its echo. Charles I of Anjou, also crowned by a pope, also in Rome. The similarities are they're striking, and it really begs the question, how do you explain a pattern like that? Is it just random historical chance, or was it designed?
Well, this theory proposes that this is no accident, not at all. Instead, it suggests these events are tied together by a hidden numerical formula, a kind of chronological key that supposedly ancient historians knew all about. And this is the magic number, apparently, 471. That's the gap connecting the deaths of our two kings. Remember that number, because it's going to keep popping up. So where does this number even come from? Well, the theory says it's not random. It's the result of a really simple calculation, 1,000 minus 529, and these two numbers are claimed to be like fundamental building blocks for how ancient chronologies were put together. And check this out. This is how it all supposedly fits together. You take the year Charlemagne died, 814. You add that key number, 471, and what do you get? 1285, the exact year Charles I of Anjou died. According to the theory, it's a perfect mathematical lock.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. That's a neat trick, but it's just one example, right? Could be a fluke. Fair enough. But that's when the theory points us to a completely different continent, and to a chronological puzzle that's actually acknowledged by mainstream science.
And this isn't just the author of our source saying this. This quote is from O. Nighibauer, a really respected scholar of ancient science. Even the experts have noticed this massive, repeating gap in the timeline of Ethiopian kings, a consistent 456-year discrepancy.
So what this means is that in the official records, you've got these kings with two completely different sets of dates for when they ruled. And the gap between those two possible timelines, it's always, consistently, 456 years. It's a well-known puzzle for historians, usually just chalked up to a complicated calendar mistake.
But get this. Let's zoom in on just one of these kings, Yekuna Amlak. When you translate the Ethiopian calendar to ours, his reign might have started in 814 AD, or it might have started in 1270 AD. Now, do those dates ring a bell? That first one, 814, is the exact year Charlemagne died, and the second one is just a few years after Charles I was crowned.
All right, so let's recap. We have a 471-year gap in Europe and a 456-year gap over in Ethiopia. At first, they seem totally different, but what if they aren't? The theory argues they are the exact same phenomenon, just seen through a different calendrical lens.
The argument here is that this discrepancy isn't some big mistake in the records, it's actually a clue. The source claims that if you just tweak the starting point of the Ethiopian world calendar, a complex but specific adjustment to the assumed date of creation, that 456-year gap magically transforms into a 471 or 472-year gap. And there it is again, that same number, 471. All of a sudden, these two puzzles from two different continents look like they're connected by the very same numerical key. Which brings us to the biggest question of all. Why?
Yeah, why would anyone go to all this trouble to create these phantom echoes in history? The theory's answer is that these weren't just random copies. They were all intentionally written to follow a single, ancient blueprint.
Think about it.
Both of these kingdoms, the Holy Roman Empire and the Solomonian dynasty in Ethiopia, were deeply, deeply rooted in Christian and Old Testament traditions. And the blueprint, it suggested, comes from one of the most famous stories ever told.
So the big idea is that the blueprint is the biblical story of ancient Israel, and the structural parallels are kind of hard to ignore. In both narratives, you get a first king anointed by a holy figure, you get a sequence of 3 great founding kings, and then after them, the kingdom splits apart.
And this right here is the heart of the whole theory. The first 3 kings of the Carolingians in the Solomonian dynasty are supposedly direct copies of Saul, David, and Solomon. Charlemagne, the great warrior and unifier, is cast as the David figure, and likewise Yekuna Amlak, who texts say restored his kingdom by remembering David, is also positioned as that very same David figure.
So, the final claim, the big takeaway from this theory is this. These weren't just guys who happened to be king. Their entire stories, their reigns, their names, even their place in time, were supposedly constructed to make their rule legitimate by echoing this foundational biblical story.
So what does this all mean? It really leaves you with a pretty wild thought, doesn't it? That what we think of as the solid, unchangeable past might be a lot more like a story that can be edited. So what should you take away from all this? Look, whether you buy this particular theory or not, it's a huge reminder that history is, first and foremost, a story. And it's always, always worth asking, who's holding the pen?